Hi, I'm David Silbert, and today I want to talk to you about conflict. It's inevitable. You won't always agree with someone's ideas or opinions, and sometimes conflicts can arise from this. I've seen it, and I'm sure many of you have too. But conflicts can get ugly when they aren't handled properly. So I spoke to Daniel Muskies, the president and chairman of the Predictive Index, and Drew Forden, our SVP of Sales and Marketing and a conflict aficionado, to find out what conflict in the workplace looks like and how to resolve it. First, I wanted to know the difference between a conflict and a disagreement.
So when you think about the difference between conflict and disagreement in the workplace setting, what I find interesting is you can think of disagreement as more passive and conflict as more active, and they can both be good and bad. Disagreement is we don't have the same opinion about a certain situation or thing. For instance, it could be cake versus pie. And that's a disagreement that you might not need to resolve in the workplace. But you could have disagreements that need to be resolved, that need to come to conclusion, or you need to agree to disagree and move forward in a constructive way. And that's where conflict comes in. And the key with conflict is it's the motion to help you bring things further along, move things towards a resolution. And that can be in a very positive or negative way as well. So when you think about the difference between those two, I often think of one as a little more on the passive side, where the other one's on the active side. And again, they can both be very good or very bad.
I don't think there's much difference between workplace conflict and disagreement. I actually think it's that workplace conflict has a negative connotation, whereas disagreement itself could have a more positive connotation to it. That said, I think any form of disagreement is conflict. It's just all on how it's perceived. And I personally feel that the more conflict that you witness on a team usually means that there's more trust involved, and therefore more ideas are born, and there's more opportunity to get aligned and to, even in some cases, disagree and commit because we trust each other so much.
It sounds like understanding the difference between a disagreement and conflict can really help out. Conflict can escalate quickly, so how can we identify good versus bad conflict?
You know, some people think that conflict is always bad, and I think that the reality is the conflicts that you often remember are the bad ones. It's the ones that you stick back and go, wow, that really destroyed value. But if you think of conflict as the resolution of different ideas, the bringing forward of ideas, the challenging others in how they're thinking and having them challenge you and being receptive to that, that can really move ideas and things forward, and that is really a form of conflict. Again, disagreement is we can disagree, agree to disagree and walk away from each other, but you might not have moved the problem forward or helped whatever you were trying to do make progress. And so I think healthy conflict is really a little like the spark that really ignites great companies. They just manage it really well.
There's disagree and sabotage, and then there's disagree and commit. And so disagreeing and committing requires that you trust your teammates, you trust their opinion, you trust their judgment enough that even if they're going to approach something not in the way that you necessarily would, that you're okay with that, totally okay with that, that you are going to commit to helping them through, and that you're not going to attempt at any moment to be like, oh, see, I told you that wasn't going to work that way, so we have to go back to the way that I was going to do it. It requires just saying, hey, everyone has great ideas, and I think that your idea works and has merit just as much as mine, so let's go with your idea, and I'm happy to put mine aside.
So, we have a better idea of what conflict is. Daniel categorizes conflict into the common types he has seen in the workplace.
So I think there's maybe 4 types of conflicts, and this is just my perspective on the types of conflict you can get out there. There's really, I would call it productive conflict, where you're bringing different ideas and you're actually evolving them and you're bringing them to a better place, right? So here's an idea, let's actually get together and make it better, right? So it's a very productive activity. Then there's the pure alignment conflict, which is getting ideas closer together, right? You're saying, hey, I've got this idea, I've got that idea, or this problem and that problem. And through that conflict, you can figure out where all those overlaps are and design a better solution going forward. And those are 2 really healthy ways to have conflict. I think the kind of unhealthy ways you see it come out is when you start seeing people get into that competitive dynamic, where it's like, I'm trying to win this conflict. And when you're trying to win your argument, you're no longer solving the problem, you're trying to beat the other person. And that's where you start seeing conflict devolve into a not so healthy place, right? And that's not a good word, a good place to be. And then you'll often see kind of the final form, which I think is really disruptive as well, is when it's personal, when you really start not appreciating the other person for who they are or what their objectives are, or you start thinking they have hidden agendas, and you really let personality styles really start preventing you from having constructive conflict to move things in the right direction. So when you look at those kind of 4 types of conflict, if you're thoughtful about navigating them and understanding when you're going to drift into the negative side, and you can find ways to navigate it back towards, hey, let's get a common goal and solve common goals, that's when you almost always will end up having positive conflict versus negative.
Okay, so we know there is good and bad conflict. How can we identify when a conflict has taken a negative turn so we can take the proper steps to address and resolve it?
So I think you can probably identify when conflict has taken a turn for providing no value or detracting from the value or culture of your organization, when you start to witness maybe people aren't sharing their ideas as much as they could, when there seems to be more bickering happening, when 2 people or groups or 2 different groups are not communicating with each other. That's usually for conflict avoidance, which means that when there is conflict, it's going to be bad because they're not used to working things out together.
So when you see conflict coming up and you know it's there and it's permeating and it's on your mind, probably one of the best things that I find to start addressing it and moving it forward is to clearly identify what is the common goal that you share with that person or persons that you're trying to solve. Because if you can make a conflict not about us, right? If you can make that conflict about how do we solve that problem, it gets you on the same side of the table so you can attack that problem and not each other. And I think that's where when you get more savvy, you're faster and better at preventing it from turning into a conflict between 2 people and making it an idea conversation about a separate problem. So now we have a common goal. So anytime you find yourself like in a frictional situation that's just like not going places, spend some time to identify what is the common theme that we're trying to do, and that'll almost always help you get on the same side as that person and end up in a much better place.
I think the hardest part is opening the door to address that there is conflict and maybe it was unhealthy, and for both parties to acknowledge, okay, maybe that wasn't healthy, I'm sorry it made you feel that way, or sorry that I didn't accept your idea. Having that sort of empathy, I think is good, and I think that's the most important part. Once you have that, I've often found that the rest is fairly easy.
Approaching conflict can be easier said than done, but keeping the tips from this video in mind can help you get closer to a productive and effective resolution. We want to know your approaches and tips for handling workplace conflict in the comments below. Leave a like if you enjoyed this video and share it with your network to help create healthy work environments. Want to dive deeper? Check out our practical guide to team dynamics over on the right and linked in the description. Thank you for watching.